Hey, it is 10 o'clock, and our fearless leader is out moving lathes or helping. No, he's not helping. He's photographing them moving lathes. And we have made Bert, I almost said Bert and Ernie. Bert, it is Bert and Ernie, co-hosts. I just realized that now. I wonder if John was doing that with intentional. He said, Jim, make Bert and Ernie co-hosts for you. And I said, I didn't even think about it until I said it now. So they're going to try to really screw up stuff for us. No, I'm just, folks, what I'm going to do is mute everybody. And then if you want to talk, it's just easier that way. You'll just have to unmute yourself and raise hands. Hopefully we have some show and tell today. Raised hands will be good. I'm muting you all now. And being host, I didn't get muted. Isn't that nice? That's a privilege. So, raise hands for show and tell or questions or conversation. Bill, we might as well start with you since you got your hand up. You'll have to unmute. Yeah,
I did that. Now I'm ready.
Go for it.
All right. I'm still working away on my first bowls. I chose a piece of walnut log that I cut a 6-inch circle out of. And I'm just turning and making mistakes and trying to fix them before I start a good one. So the biggest problem I have with this is hollowing the inside. Boy, oh boy, that was a big deal to hollow the inside. But I learned that you have to use a scraper on the inside, which I did. And now I'm trying to control the depth of the thickness of the sides and the bottom before I cut the tenon off, which is what my next trip will be, is to cut the tenon off. So I'm making progress, but that's my first natural edge attempt at a bowl, complete with cracks from the log drying and everything.
Very nice.
Thank you.
You'll learn the next fun. When you cut the tenon off, there's a big hole in the bottom. Then you'll say, oh, I got another learning. So
why is there a hole in the bottom?
Oh, because you cut the bottom too thin. That's all. I was joking. I'm sorry. Bill, I just wanted to alert you for what happens. I have a lot of experience with that. That's the reason I mentioned it.
Thank you, guys.
Hey, good luck. Yeah, you know, I want to make one comment about mistakes. They are just opportunities for a unique turning. Just think of it that way. It's not a mistake. It's an opportunity for a unique turning. So anybody have any questions for Bill or suggestions?
Yeah, Bill, why did you find that you had to use a scraper rather than a bowl gouge?
Bill?
I had to figure out a way to get into the corners and get a hook. When I turn the bowl gouge on its side like you're supposed to, pointing the bevel toward the direction you want to go, I was having a real hard time being able to see inside at the bottom of that bowl. And so I just kept making mistakes. I kept getting bad catches, and it would slip off of the edge that I was trying to run. So I just decided to try a scraper. And I had recently purchased a couple scrapers, and when I got them out of the package to use them, they were about as sharp as a butter knife. So it took me a while to regrind one of the scrapers and get it suitable for working. So that was yesterday, actually, or the day before, I forget.
So you said you couldn't see inside of the bowl. Is that because you have no lighting system to light the inside?
No, it's because I had to lean over and try to look inside, and the tool rest was in the way, the chisel was in the way. I just couldn't see where I wanted to see inside.
So one of the things you might want to consider is don't look where the tool is. Look 180 degrees on the other side from where the tool is. And as it's cutting, you'll see the cutting action on the far side of the bowl bottom. That sounds a little crazy,
No,
But
I hear what you're saying. I did
yeah,
learn that.
it takes
too.
practice. It takes practice, but
I did learn
yeah.
that too. And it is a great way to know what you're doing. But I think I'm just having new experiences with doing this type of work. And I just have to work through a handful of things.
Don,
Richard Raffin uses he uses scrapers on the bottom of the bowls a lot of times too, because they are more effective on the bottom of a bowl, and sometimes getting in there with a bowl gouge can be a challenge. So
Right.
there's nothing wrong with using a scraper. You use a tool that works. That's the whole idea, is find a
Right.
tool that works for you, and that's the right tool for you. It may not be the right tool for me or somebody else, but what works for you, that just find a tool that works and go with it.
Right. I was real happy with how the scraper worked for me.
Yeah.
Don, Bill, the other thing, there's two things to keep in mind. One is feel. You can feel with the chisel if you do it carefully, and you can tell when you get to a certain point. The other one is sound. You can tell when you're going to about cut, and put those two together, and eventually you'll get it. You know, I had the same issue. Scooping out the inside of a bowl is grunt work, and you have to be careful. So
I got a lot of checks when I was doing it because I was trying to get too much wood taken off, I guess, at a time. So I had to really back off with the pressure and try to ease my way through, so I would have smaller chips, but no checks.
Yep. Any
Or
more
no catches, I mean.
Any more comments for Bill?
Bill, I use a bowl gouge, and as I approach the bottom, I start rotating it counterclockwise. And so that when I reach the bottom and the perfectly flat part on the bottom, my tool is almost completely open.
You must have it sharpened differently than mine are, because I don't know how that would work with mine. I'm trying to envision what's going to be cutting if I turn the flute straight up. That's what you're saying, right? Straight up?
Yes.
You cut with the tip of the gouge? Okay.
The bottom. Yeah.
Okay. That's why. I'll try that.
Don, did you want to make a comment? You're muted.
I'm not muted.
No, Don.
All I was going to say was that when I'm doing my bowl gouges that I'm using, especially if I'm going to do a natural edge, I use what's known as a shear grind. It's more swept back, so you have more of the cutting edge coming out, so that when you go in, you can really get close into any corner.
Right.
It's what they call a shear grind. I haven't got one available. I would show you.
Is that the same as a finger grind, what we call a finger grind over here? Is that different, Don?
No, a finger grind over here is literally that.
Okay.
But a shear grind is with your finger, you're coming back here.
Some people call that the Irish grind or the Ellsworth grind, where you've got swept back wings. It's
That's
a
right,
little bit
yeah.
more swept back than a fingernail. Yeah.
Ellsworth learned that grind from Liam O'Neill, who was the main partisan. It's an Irish grind. And what we would just call that an Irish grind that was swept back more. But generally in doing that, you also bring down the tip radius considerably so that you can do those fine cuts on a natural edge and go in and guide the tool better. And you're absolutely right. And as that comes around, you have to turn that tool slowly so that as you reach the very center, you've got to be right on the center line, and the flute will be almost vertical.
Yeah. And of course, when you're getting towards the center, you need to slow your cut down because you're going much faster in the center than you are on the outside. The other thing with the tool is on the heel of my grind, I also take the sharp edge of that grind off so that you've got a second facet, so that when you do go in, you're not making a trailing line with the bowl as you go around. You are literally only cutting.
And Bill, one of the things you'll find with that grind that Don's talking about is you call it a shear grind because you can lay your tool over and do a sheer, nice, smooth cut to finish off if you're good.
Yep.
I cut mine, I grind mine all that way because I do use that a lot, so.
Yeah, mine's cut that way. It's swept back maybe 3/4 of an inch on the left side, and the other side isn't that far. It's because it's not going to cut on the right side. So I'm moving in the right direction. I just don't know what I'm doing.
Well,
Jim, may I? Yeah.
Mike,
another comment.
Mike, go ahead if you wanted to come in on
Yeah,
this.
I just want to say, last year I taught a fellow who knew nothing about wood, let alone wood turning, how to turn a bowl virtually out of my workshop with Zoom and with coaching with videos, video clips and photos, et cetera, et cetera. And Bill, don't take any offense to what I'm going to say, but the bowl you produced is the classic beginner bowl, and we commonly refer to them as dog dishes.
Yeah, it looks like a dog dish.
You've got the straight edges. You make it difficult for yourself because of the straight edges, because you can't get in at that corner. And
Right.
let me say, like, I started turning 60 years ago in high school and did a little bit, on my old lathe, and then I got back into it just about 22, 23 years ago. I found the bowl gouge extremely challenging. I had the old style stamped spindle gouges, and I did turn bowls with them, not very big. We had a pile of wood in the old farmhouse that I glued up and made some sail bowls. When I look at them, I used to have a real laugh now. And they look more or less like the bowl you made with a little bit of stuff on the outside.
Yeah.
But anyway, I found when I was learning the bowl gouge, a less aggressive grind on it. I actually ground mine and my workmate with a belt sander tipped at 45 degrees until I finally convinced myself 2 years later to buy a grinder and the Berry grind and the one-way Wolverine system, et cetera. Right. There's nothing wrong with using scrapers. I mean, one of the things I've been teaching in our guild for over 20 years, and I think the biggest part of turning is learning the interaction of the tool with the wood and getting comfortable with that feel, no matter what tool it is. And the scraper is a great one to use for that. One of the last wood shows that we had in where we actually could attend, Lee Valley had given us a bunch of the easy tools just to have in the booth. And so I tried one just for the hell of it. And I was amazed. That thing could hog wood like crazy. And, so there's no shame in scraping. I would focus on, my first bowl book was Ernie's book on bowls. I think I mentioned last week. But either Raffin's or Ellsworth's books on bowls, and look at the shape of the bowl. And when you have that nice, gentle curve, the hardest part of a bowl is that bottom third segment where you're going from the wall into the bottom of the bowl. And you don't want a flat bottom in the bowl. You want a nice curve. That was one of the laws of bowl turning that I first picked up when I joined that guild. So that it makes it a lot easier. And you can go crazy. The comments that I've heard about the bowl gouge are so far above where you're at right now. You just basically want to just play with that gouge on a piece of wood and turn it and I did hear mentioning, turn the gouge as you're cutting. My clue to people is always make sure that you're getting a shearing or a cutting cut with a tool, never a scraping cut. So you play with the tool and the angle of approach. You'll generally be cutting just off the nose of the gouge, and sometimes along the wing, depending what you're doing. And as you get more comfortable with it. The other thing that I would say is the pull cut is it can be aggressive, but once you master it, is a beautiful cut with the bowl gouge.
Kai, do you have something you want to say about this?
Yeah, I'd like to make a quick comment on sharpening for different parts of the bowl. I understand that it is a really difficult subject. When you begin turning, you have just one bowl gouge, and maybe I can show something here. Can you spotlight me, Jim?
Yes. Sorry, I was busy doing other things. Hang on, I'll spotlight you. There we go. Somebody, my co-host took care of that. Thanks.
I'll try to show this model here. So that's a grind you often find. It's ground back on the sides, and you have a kind of a secondary bevel down here, so that the cutting, or here it is not too long, and you can have the cutting edge into contact with the wood, even if you go into the bowl. So grinding this a little bit back helps. And then if you really get into the bowl and you get to the center of the bowl, it helps to have a steeper angle here. So that's the cutting edge, the silver part, and this wooden looking bit here is just ground back, so to get the material out of the way, and then you cut on this bit here. So that is for the inside, especially if you get deep into the bowl, and that's more for the outside, and when you start your cut at the rim of the bowl. So it helps maybe to have two different gouges for these two purposes. But grinding is a subject I think we could discuss for ages as well, and then the right tool angles and how you hold it and stuff like this. I can imagine that it's a big problem, or it was for me at least a big problem as a beginner, and scrapers help in some cases. At some point, I think one will realize that the surface left by cutting is often better than the surface left by scraping. And then you will go more into cutting and put the scraper aside, or use it only for special purposes. But yeah, so that's what I wanted to say. When you discuss the how you hold the tool, it also matters how you grind the tool, and there are different grinds for different areas of the bowl. Right. Thank you.
Kai, your profile has around the pointed one, the fingernail one end of it. I like mine straight, so on that profile, straight across, so that I can shear scrape better right there.
Yeah.
So I hold it down more on the wheel when I grind it. So yeah.
So you don't want to have it round here, but
nope. I want it straight there. Yeah.
Well, you can still shear scrape by altering the angle, and you have only a small portion touching the wood then.
You're right.
Yeah. Okay. I'll put it aside.
The other end is what we call bottom gouge, right? Or whatever. I see them advertised as such, and I wondered about how you actually use that on the bottom. You just go straight in. Is that what you're doing?
You use the either here, the middle, or the edge.
Okay.
Maybe I can try to videotape it and show it sometime.
Okay. Yeah.
The first one you showed, Kai, I call it a Roman nose because the flank or wing of the tool will start to cut before the nose bevel engages, and it makes them a little hard to start. Okay. Where if you can put a sheet of paper down and it touches the cutting edge everywhere, it makes a cleaner cutting gouge.
Oh, okay. You're talking about this bit here?
Yeah. Well, your entire cutting edge should be able to be touched by a sheet of paper, and it touches everywhere. The way, at least at the camera angle you have, it looks like that rounds down and actually is a curve on the wing of the tool. And that makes it a little harder to start. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe.
Try jointing, what I call jointing the edge, and then regrinding it, because everything else about the grind is perfect.
And like you mentioned, Kai, we could have a whole topic on grinding, and I would welcome that sometime, because everybody has it. Somebody, let me see. One of my co-hosts went on spot. Oh, here. Thank you. I forgot to have a remove spotlight. Go ahead, Ernie.
Just before we go, one night at the symposium with a few drinks in me, I drew this on the bowl gouge. And
hold it up again, Ernie.
Hold it up again.
I just spotlighted you now. The Irish bowl grind. Okay.
And I have it in the Gouge, it's written, it has been attributed to Liam O'Neill, David Ellsworth, Al Sturt, Mick O'Donnell, Ray Key, and many others. Sadly, history will never know who the inventor was. Worst of all, there is ample evidence that the inspiration was not Irish. And of course, this is a bottle of Johnny Walker, which is not Irish whiskey.
You're going to get some of us Irish rooted guys a little upset. So, who do we got next? Randy, you have been waiting so patiently. Go ahead.
I just have a drill chart. And if anybody's interested in it, it shows all the different drill sizes, cross-referenced and sized. So you can see this is a little bit more than this. This is a little bit less than this. And if anybody wants, I'll post it in the chat.
That would be helpful. Which reminds me, in that
You can buy them right there.
yeah, in the discussion about drill sizing, assumes you have a very, very precise drill, a drill press, because some of those tolerances are going to go away with the vibration of the drill, right? Right. Well, that brought it to a standstill. Hello, Randy.
Okay, I'll post it momentarily.
Okay.
I gotta find it.
Is that it? Okay, cool. Jeff, it looks like you're up next.
Yeah, for once, I've got a project that's a little unusual for me. Like everybody, I try to, do balls, but naturally, I decided to make spindles. Can you see that?
Yes.
Yep.
So the remit for this was our church pastor wanted something his confirmation kids could carry up to the altar. So he wanted two candle holders that came apart in the middle, and then one cross that came apart in the middle. So there's a dozen pieces to put together. The cross is about 7 feet tall, all out of birch. Let's see if I can get the other one up. And that's a close-up on the top of the cross. So that ended up being just very simple walnut. I cut it out on the CNC. That was the easy part. And then echo the one they got up on the wall. So it's nice to start a spindle. Those ones were rather long for me. I've got a one-way 1640. And so these, the longest ones here, because there's a dowel goes from the bottom up into the bottom of this thing for stability. And the longest one is about 31 inches. So cutting a taper like that, that's fun. Three inches at the top, tapering to 1.5 inches. Brass is horrendously expensive. So I was lucky to find pieces of brass 1.5 inches for $1.50 at Lee Valley. They're ferrules for tool ends. So I told the pastor he could have 1.5 inch candles. That's it. So that's all I was going to show about that.
Well, that's quite the turning. I was going to ask if you had a long enough lathe to turn those long, as segmenting them into shorter pieces helps. So.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah. And that was handy. I would have preferred to turn it kind of 2/3, 1/3, you know.
Yeah.
So 2/3 on the bottom and then 1/3 of it at the top. I thought that would have looked better. And let's see if I can turn off my background. Oh well, that would have looked better. So I'll do his paschal candle that way with a heavier top and a heavier bottom, because they're great big 3-inch candles, and they're a lot heavier and a lot taller. So guys that turn regular spindles, that's nothing. But for me to do a taper that's about, between 2 feet and 2.5 feet long, and get it even with just a couple of diameters to go from. That was fun. That was a good challenge.
Don't look at it too closely. That's the secret.
Oh no, it worked out perfect. You know, get a straight edge on it to make sure it's straight. You can see the light. If it's not, then the sander comes out. And the hardest part is just getting those dowels fitted into the bottom of the carrying piece so that the whole thing is solid.
Yeah.
But still able to get it off.
You know, we're all working with a product or an end product that is not designed for precision because it's so movable and soft and hard and all that. It's a challenge. I'm always interested to find out how the grain redirects my indications of where I want it to sit, you know, so yeah. Any questions for the gentleman? All right, I see Clifton.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I wanted to, I have my own wood gouges, and years ago you couldn't buy the swept back, but now you can, and mostly they came like this. And then, so on mine I have it double-ended where we showed the how to joint that edge. I think somebody mentioned. And then I have another one where you take those edges off, and then the last one where you actually have the shape. And of course, you know, each shape is slightly different, so, you know, to each his own, as they say, right? But really, these are always fun, and they're a great prop to help people understand, you know, how to sharpen and how to present the tool to the wood. But what I wanted to show this week was on our on the AAW site, we had a discussion on bandsaws and changing the bearing to that rub block, or the cool blocks, I think they're called. And I have bearings on mine, and they get packed with stuff, you know, the sap and the sawdust and such. And so I thought, you know, now is the time to change it, because I got lucky to get some redwood from the botanical gardens, and I thought it was really going to be sappy. So I is my screen share up?
Yep.
So I took the bearings off and I put these blocks on, and I was really amazed at how well I know it's strange, how well they worked. Then I was waffling on whether I should have this end grain should probably be facing the grain, but these I just put up here to see if it would work. But I was wondering if anybody else had any experience with and I think the trade name is Cool Blocks. But I can buy a block of the material that's 6 inches by, I think, a ½ inch thick by something else. So I could make these out of that material, but I didn't know if it was worth the $30-some to buy that. So I was hoping somebody has experience with this.
I've used them for years, used to sell them as well.
Right, the Cool Blocks?
Yeah, Cool Blocks, and they work extremely well. And the advantage to them is the tracking on a inexpensive bandsaw is sometimes not all it could be.
No doubt.
And they'll drift back on the wheel on you. And bingo, you've ruined a blade with normal guides. And where the Cool Blocks don't harm the blade whatsoever, and you can take them over to a sander and reface them and put them back on. They worked well with the old Delta type guides where you had a set screw with a square piece that you fed into them. They are more difficult to replace if you have wheels now, as usually bearings on either side of the blade. But if you have that kind of guide, they work very well. But I don't know they'd work any better than end grain hardwood of a really hardwood like white oak.
Well, I have a piece of lignum vitae, so that's what I was going to use. But so these are Carter support blocks, you know,
Right.
for the whole system. And you can see, I just drilled the hole, and I used the bushing that came with the bearings. I don't know if I need to do that, but I did. And then I put this piece on the bottom to rest on the bottom of this block so they wouldn't swivel.
You've done a very workmanship-like job on that. It's a very nice installation, and I don't see why you'd really need to buy cool blocks. And if you have lignum, that's the hardest wood in the world, used formerly in naval ship propeller bearings.
Bearings, yeah. Yeah, I've heard of that. So, okay, well, I made these, as I had mentioned to somebody else, for proof of concept. And then another thing I noticed is they seem quieter than the bearings.
Yeah.
Much quieter.
And so the other part was, after all this work, that redwood wasn't as sappy as I thought it was going to be. But I still like these, so I'm probably going to keep them on there. But anyways, well, I appreciate the input. I appreciate the input.
Very, very good job. Very, very nice job.
Thank you.
Would Osage orange work as guide blocks as well? Or is there a reason not
Yeah.
to?
I'm sure it would. I don't have any.
I have a whole pile of it. That's the reason
problem
I'm
with
asking.
redwood today is you somehow got real redwood from a botanical garden, but
Yeah.
there's so much new growth redwood they cut for lumber today, and it has large amounts of sapwood, and they actually dye it red to make it look like old growth. And you'll be working with it and put anything like alcohol or water on it, and it all turns red.
I'll be darned. Yeah, no kidding.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, Clifton,
Yes, sir.
one thing you can do if you have the number on the bearings, if you get the bearing number in their standard sizes, just add a Z to the end or a ZZ, because that designates a shielded bearing.
Right.
If you wanted to just replace the bearings, you could do that.
Well, no, and I have the bearings, and the other nice thing is I have a bearing supply house. So when somebody says they paid $60 to get the bearing for their thing, I'm paying $12 for the same bearing for a Timken. So I hate to, it's always after the fact. Somebody says, "Oh, I replaced the bearings and it cost me X amount," and I think, "Oh, why didn't you go buy the bearing?" Like I said, a Timken bearing is a good bearing, or a SK, whatever it is, SKF. But if you go to the manufacturer, you're going to pay.
Well, their skateboard bearings is what my Rikon has on it. Rikon charges some outrageous price, but I went and looked at the dimensions of it, and I said, "That's a skateboard bearing."
I don't
It
think
literally is. And now, obviously, it's cheap, and you just got to see when they freeze up, throw it away, and put the next one on.
Those are
I
shielded.
keep a whole pack of them in the bottom of my bandsaw, but I switched to the easy system on the Rikon. I forget what they call it, so I don't use those bearings anymore. So.
Right. Well, I switched to the rubbing blocks or the cool blocks because the bearing packs the blade and the bearing with a combination of sap and sawdust, and then I have to well, I don't want to tell you what I do because it probably isn't the right thing to do, but I get that off by any means possible, and the rub blocks seem to keep that from happening. As the blade comes by the block, it kind of strips off the sap.
Yeah.
So that's why I put the rub blocks on to begin with.
I changed blades to 3/4 inch because I wanted really big toothed ones. I wanted to really rip through some stuff, and I couldn't move the bottom block front enough. And lo and behold, there was a chunk of wood blocking it back there, which I never knew about. Well, anyways, the question is, they have, I don't know if they all do, but they have this little double plastic shield underneath the blade, underneath the table. If I took it off, is that a problem? What's that there for? You guys are engineers or know bandsaws real well. What's that all about?
I took mine off.
I think
Okay,
that that's-
thanks, Don.
I think that that's there to keep the things that go through the table. It pushes them off to the side. Otherwise, and I don't have those, but I have had a small sliver slide through the throat and pinch between the bearing and the blade, and I had to cut this. I mean, you know right away, turn this off, and then you have to pull that out. But your little guy got, snuck behind it. So
Well, the most of those are put there on an angle, and the blade runs through it like this, and they divert most of the swarth into the dust ejection port, and is sucked up by the blower then in modern bandsaws.
Yeah.
right.
Ernie, I seem to remember that on some of the vendor shows that there's a bandsaw manufacturer that demonstrates his bandsaw blades without using any kind of a cool block or a bearing.
That's Timberwolf is the blade. And you can do that with any bandsaw blade.
If it's sharp,
Yeah.
right out
And-
of the package.
And you put a fair amount of tension on the blade. But, the thing about a salesman, you can always tell when he's lying is when his lips are moving.
Yeah.
One thing I do with my bearings, once a week, I just give it a very light spray of WD-40.
Uh-huh.
That just
Good.
run them with your fingers just to make it. And I find I've been running for 2-3 years on the same bearings.
Yeah. Kai, did you want to comment about this, or you have another topic? You're muted. Yeah.
If you make your own wooden guide blocks, should the part that touches the blade be end grain rather than side grain?
It would be better if it was that way.
I think it should.
Okay, right. That's it.
What-
Thank you.
What are cool blocks made of? What you refer to these cool blocks? Are they wood? Are they ceramic?
They're essentially a mixture of some polymer with graphite.
Okay. They got a lubricant built into it, huh? Yeah.
Yes.
Clifton,
By the way, go ahead.
this is John. How do you, is there any adjustment to the clearance side to side from the blade with those wooden blocks? Or is it just, you're just set?
A sheet of paper works. Putting one sheet of paper on either side of the blade, it doesn't matter. You adjust one guide till it touches the blade, put a sheet of paper in the other side, close the block, and that gives you a nice clearance in there.
Right.
Right,
I believe he's asking if these have any lateral motion.
yes,
It's true. If I loosen this, is my little cursor showing?
Yes.
Yes.
yes,
So if I loosen this cap screw, this piece here is a threaded dowel that goes through this aluminum block. So when I loosen this, then this I can pull in and out, or actually I just hold my fingers on the block and this moves in and out. So
okay,
when I adjusted this, and again, don't do this at home, but I had the blade running and I slowly pushed it over till you can feel a nice little friction on it without deflecting the blade. And then I tightened that down, and then I did the other one. And after a few hours of cutting, and I have one here, it's just you can't really see it in the camera, but with a few hours of cutting, where's me?
Here you are. I spotlighted you.
Okay.
Hold it to the center and up
There-
here,
yeah.
up higher.
With a few hours of cutting, where's that little rub? There's hardly any rub. It's not that side. There's hardly any rub. I mean, I can't even, there's rub on the long grain, but not a lot. You can see there's the dowel. And as I pull this out, I can slide this in or out to the piece. Well, actually,
Bring it towards your face.
There you go.
yeah.
That's
So-
better.
Anyways, like I said, that on the piece, there's hardly any, after a few hours, there's hardly any rub on this block. So I was happy with it. I'll still go eventually. My little piece of lignum vitae I put in a safe place, and I don't know where that is, so I'll find it eventually and make these. And I will then, when I do that, again, you know, I made these kind of proof of concept, but I will shift them so the end grain I think would be better towards the blade.
I think probably it's a testament to the blade you're using and the bandsaw alignment. If it's not rubbing much, that really shouldn't have to be rubbing the blade if it's tensioned up and running straight, right? Am I right about that, guys?
I think so, but the reason I had it basically touching, I mean, because I pushed it over to, you know, you get the feel, was that as the blade came past this, it would strip off the sawdust and sap. And so it did. So I mean, that was a success in my book. I certainly know what the bearing does when I get when I'm cutting a lot of green wood. I get that blade and the bearing just gets packed until I have to stop, and I have a scraper and I scrape it off.
I use a screwdriver.
Yeah. So, I mean, all the things we're not supposed to do, but, you know, nobody's looking over my shoulder, so I get it done.
Just don't stand at the end for when you break the blade and it comes shooting straight out. So
I'm not breaking the blade.
But, you know, the other question is it and we could do a whole topic on bandsaws, but I notice, and I'm using some Timberwolves, I don't know which one I have on. If I'm cutting 13 inches, the blade wants to go its own way and I want to force it to go around. Not that I'm at the wrong radius, it's just that it doesn't want to go. And after a while, it just twists like this. And I'm going, I have the tension as tight as I can get it on this 3/4 inch. And I don't know, is that just the way it goes, or is that a bad sign of a blade?
No,
I think what you're finding there is that, or what I found is, you're trying to push the wood through the bandsaw too quickly. If the bandsaw is not going perfectly straight, there's the first thing you got to make sure is that it's a good blade with no nicks. Even one tooth that's been touched metal or something is going to cause it to wander. But if you push the wood through too fast, it will bend your blade around. And it's amazing how slow you have to go. You have, especially if you're doing 13 inches, when your first tooth cuts, it's got to take all that wood that it cut all the way through your log to get it out the bottom. And if you don't wait that split second or millisecond for that to happen, it's bound up and it'll try and twist around. And it's really, really hard to get a feel for that. But one of the guys that I watched setting up a bandsaw, his name was Snodgrass, and that's probably the best explanation I've seen of how to set up a bandsaw. And what I took away from his is that if you have a sharp blade, it doesn't matter the quality of your bandsaw, as long as you've got a blade on it and it's tensioned, you don't even need guides, unless you're trying to turn a corner.
Yeah.
And you know what, that's what I took away from it. I set my guides so they keep it straight and whatever, but I found out that by learning to push the wood through slowly, you don't need a guide unless you're trying to turn a corner. And that's what my takeaway is, that sharp blade. And if you put your guides in and it touches the tooth, like if your thrust bearing is set too far back and your blade happens to go through the guides, even if it's cool blocks, it bends the set on your blade. And now your blade, for all intents and purposes, is ruined, but you won't notice it because it feels sharp, but it'll wander like you can doodle on the wood instead of cutting it.
Bert, I think you're right.
Jim?
Yeah, Kai. Go ahead, Kai. I'll talk
when you're talking about your blade twisting, are you cutting bowl blanks or are you cutting turning squares?
bowl blanks, and I'm going on, I want to follow a radius, and I'm not talking about a tight one. I'm talking one that's the size that's supposed to be for the blank I'm turning, but it wants to twist.
Yeah, maybe just one little experience. I have a rather wide blade on my bandsaw because I can sharpen this myself quite easily with the equipment I've got. And what I do is I make straight cuts that touch the circle that I want to cut out. And then like a tangent, is it tangent in English?
Tangent.
Yeah, so
Tangent.
Tangent. Okay, so a lot of tangent to your circle, and then you get it nearly round, and then you can try even with a blade that is a little bit too wide to cut it round, and that works rather well. It takes a little bit more time, but you can use a wide blade, and they are usually more stable than the other plates, the smaller ones, and then maybe you don't have that problem. So that is one thing you could try if your blade starts twisting. Take a series of straight cuts and then try to get to your circle this way.
Kai,
Kai has a rather good demonstration of how he sharpens bandsaw blades in his coffee hour that's worth going back into the archives. Do you know what number it was, Kai?
No, I don't know, but it's quite a long time ago. I can try to find it. Yeah, I'll do. But that uses special equipment. I mean, it's old mechanical sharpening equipment that I bought that's driven by an electric motor, and that's usually something that might be hard to get.
I'm coming in here and disrupting you right now because I'm at New Holland Kitchens, where these guys are loading the lathe and all other stuff onto the truck. So I'm calling in on my phone, and I'm going to see. There goes Ben and Ron Sheehan with our big TV onto the Penske truck. Hey, Bowman, you can probably spotlight this if anybody can hear me.
I just did.
Cool. I'm not going to eat up too much of your hour, but I'll be. They're going to roll the lathe over next. I think we just took all the gear from the storage unit to the hotel, and now we're at Kaufman Kitchens getting the rest of the club gear, and we're going to go get 3 more lathes after the big Powermatic gets on from here. So I just called in to say hi and to show you the action here. This is what it looks like here in Kaufman Kitchens. You see this, if you can see the mezzanine, the stairs up in the mezzanine way over in the far side, way over there. That's where we took a lathe out of here last night on a forklift. We took it down 12 feet between a huge pile of boxes like that.
Hey, John, could you give us the route of that truck? It'd be one to hijack if you're into wood turning.
You bet. There's going to be 2 Powermatics and 2 one-ways on it within the hour.
I'll be holding the auction back near the Berks County line. So.
So I'm going to duck off again. I just wanted to say hi. This always takes longer than you think it does. So the video can be short, but in real time takes a while.
Hey, I'm glad you came in. I was hoping to see you. So
yeah.
We're having some really good discussions, some of which we need to extend for a whole, make it the discussion for the coffee hour,
Sure. Well, I'll talk to you all about that later on. I'm going to get back to taking good video of what's going on here today if I can.
All right, John.
I'm going to quit putting my finger over my phone camera lens too.
Have fun, John.
Thank you, guys. Bye.
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 Hey, Kai, I wanna say I love your idea, because when you're cutting a pole blank, you don't need to have it round. You just don't want the big points on the end. So, I mean, you're going to put it in the lathe and round it out anyway. So if you get it down to a manageable point and balanced is the secret. You don't need it round. So I love your idea. I'm afraid, guys, that probably I'm my worst enemy, meaning that my blades are probably have hit things they shouldn't hit. And so even though it feels sharp, even my good ones are probably have a reason to be wandering. The other thing is in relation to the bandsaw. Gosh, I forgot it. It's the old guy problem. So,
I would like to go with Kai, because the way to do it, because if you find you've got a smaller blade on and you don't want to change it, when you're trying to turn a circle, it does tend to twist the blade as you're turning. So by going your straight cuts, making them in tangents all the way around, you don't have to take the corner off it. You can put it right in your center, put it on the lathe, and away you go.
I know what I was going to say. I bought a resawing blade that has 2 smaller dust removers and then a blade. And I haven't put it on yet, but it's supposed to work really well because it clears the track quicker when you're cutting it. The guy that sold it to me, he had ordered 2 of them. He was in my other club. And he said, Jim, you'll be surprised. Well, I just haven't put it on yet. The one big question that exists, I've been hearing that if you're cutting green wood with your bandsaw, you ruin the blades. Did you hear that, poppycock, yourself or not?
The only time if you're cutting green wood that ruins the blade is if your green wood's been laying on the ground and you're cutting through bark. It has the, if it's urban wood, urban trees that come off of a side of a roadway, the bark is full of silicon carbide dust, and that will dull a blade in seconds. And so if you got it out of the forest, it's not so bad. But if it's an urban tree where the roads have been, 20, 30 years, they've been driving trucks and cars down the road, the dust that comes off, the fine dust gets in the bark, and it's thick and it's like sandpaper. It'll take the edges off your bandsaw almost instantly. So I've got a blade that I use for roughing logs, and then I switch blades and then cut my circles, because I found that you can ruin a blade in 5 minutes just from urban logging.
Ernie, did you have a comment?
Yes, I think that we've all been talking around something that basically very important to turning radiuses is the blade be really sharp. And I use a 3 or 4 tooth hook design for most of my bowl blanks, and it's very aggressive. But it'll clear swarth. It cuts very fast. And, but I weld my own. I actually braze my own, and I've made a jig. You can buy jigs to do it, but I can show that in a coffee hour, how you braze one sometime. But it's very easy to do yourself. And I buy a 100-foot roll from McMaster Carr for about $85 I bought just a couple of months ago. And I can make 7 blades out of that for my big Rikon, but it takes a 13-foot 6 blade.
The sharpening shop I used to use when I lived in Pennsylvania was back near the Berks County line. I was referring to it later. They buy that stock in rolls, and you go in and I told him I need a 111 inch, and he pulls it out, welds it together, and hands it to me. Charged me like 10 or 15 bucks. I about said, well, this is cheap metal, but it worked great. So, yeah.
So, Ernie, what are you using as a brazing material?
I use a eutectic, the eutectic of a silver braze series.
Okay.
And you can actually melt that with a propane torch if it's a very small weld. But I took an old lathe tool rest and milled a slot in it so I can set the blades in them. And I milled a hole out of the center, and I touch them. And then you just take them like this. It's wrapped around in a circle like this. And you walk over to a grinder, you touch one side, then you touch the other. Alternate interior angles are equal. And you bring them together in the jig with a little flux on them. Borax essentially, and put the heat to it, a drop of braze, you'll see it flow, and then you take a Dremel tool and grind it off the excess.
So it's a scarf joint is what
it is, a scarf. Okay. And I used to have a commercial spot welding machine. I break less blades that I braze myself than I did from that machine.
I don't think they scarf the spot weld ones, do they?
No, it's a butt joint.
They just bring it together on that. We used to have a bandsaw that had this thing mounted on the side.
Do-all, probably.
Do-all, yep. And it just sparked it, and then you had to anneal it or something along those. But I have hard solder, hard silver solder. I have the flux. I have everything I need. I just haven't bought the roll. My blades I get from a saw company made up. I buy Lennox blades, and they're pretty good, and they don't cost that much if you get them from a distributor, not from a woodcraft store.
I learned something about welding. Oh, here's Ernie. Go ahead.
So there's, not to be confused with the Conover tool rest, but there's one I see I've milled a slot across there, and then a second slot so that the teeth are up free and won't be bent by it. And these two hold downs that just allow you to secure it, and then you can braze up through here.
I'm gonna do it. I'm gonna try it.
Does that
You
fit
can
in your
actually
lathe?
make it out of wood, and it will work fine. John Wilson does it all the time, and you just have to be careful. And if the wood catches fire, have a cup of water there.
Is that fit your banjo? It looked like a 1-inch stud.
Yeah, it's a one.
Okay, sure.
I use sawblades.com. They seem to produce a pretty good blade.
Ray, are you waiting to have a conversation with us?
Yes, Jim.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Did you said you went from a 1/2 to a 3/4 inch blade?
I did.
Yeah, I did that. I thinking that if I'm going to go to a bigger blade, I was going to benefit. And I found out that I actually worked better with the 1/2 inch that I started with, is that I couldn't get a radius. And that may be what you're running into also.
Well, I knew I was trading off radius.
Yeah, so that's what you do. So then when you put pressure on it, it's so big, and when you go put pressure on it, you have a problem with it. I went back to a 1/2 inch and I'm happier. The comment about greenwood, what happens with greenwood is greenwood doesn't clear out like the dry wood does. So when you get those skip tooth blades, they're cleaning that stuff out. So that's why when you get some, if you look at the ones they actually designate greenwood blades, I think you'll see that the blades are a little bit different. And one other thing, you commented on the bearings that look like rollerblade bearings.
Yeah.
There are a lot of those out there. The mistake guys make, I hear all the time that guys go, oh, I got these bearings and boy, they're so cheap. They don't realize that these bearings have a rating, and the ABEC ratings on these, especially on anything that can be used in a skate wheel, they'll get the cheap ones are only a couple dollars a piece, and they're bad. I mean, so when you look at it and you say, well, if I got a saw, let me get the best rating I can, because the bang's going to last for a long time. Because if it seizes up while you're running, like you were talking about, cutting a big piece, if you lose a bearing and that runs, you just overheated your blade. So if you don't realize that and you break a saw blade, now if you got a $60 or $70 saw blade in there, over $1.50 bearing. So if they're cheap, you're probably missing something.
You're right, Ray. And I've been surprised how many times I ran my bandsaw with frozen bearings on those wheels. You just don't pay attention to it. But you're right. It's building up heat. So it's not. Hey, we only have a couple minutes, and I see Randy has his hand up. Did you want to comment, or do you have something you want to say, Randy?
Yes, I did. This is a safety spotlight. If you are cutting small pieces on your bandsaw, I always put a piece of painter's tape on either side of the blade, and one in the front and one in the back, because I once was cutting small pieces off, had a piece fall through the little round circle, got caught between the blade and the wheel on the lower wheel. Bang! And I had a costume malfunction. I actually had to go upstairs, turn the saw off. It did not cut me. I was not in any danger, but I turned the saw off and went upstairs and stayed upstairs for about a half an hour.
Well, they call that zero clearance throat plates, don't they? Is that what you're referring to? After you use them a while, the blade just wears them again, so you got to put new ones in. But yeah.
Oh yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's good for maybe 2 or 3 cuts, and then
yeah.
Painter's tape is cheap.
Hey, folks, like John would say, we've invested another hour on a Thursday morning with a great bunch of guys, learning a heck of a lot of things without John even being here, except for once. So, hey, well, great. I always look forward to seeing you all, including you ladies. Hello, Sarah. And let me see who else they say. I better be careful who, if I start recognizing women, I'm in trouble. Hi, Kathy. So, hey, thanks, and see you all. Hopefully those you're around here will see you at Mid-Atlantic. So, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Happy fall.
So,
Take care, everybody.
Thanks, Jim.
Yep. Yep.
Thanks, everybody. Yep, yep.
See you, Bill. Good to see
Yep.
you.
Yeah. See ya. Bye.
Bye-bye. Bye, Don.
Bye, Jim.
Wood shop. Thank God for wood.